Welcome to the Strike the Ground podcast. I'm Jamily. This is Pierre. Thank you so much for coming back. We're really excited to get this episode going, which might end up being a two-parter. I know we've...
at least 2 parts, because I would say it's pretty relevant to the conversation that's happening in the world today. And so it definitely has a lot to kind of unpack with how we are making our decisions. And then, I'll let Jamily kind of take the lead with kind of unpacking the story of what's going to happen today.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about homeschool and our journey into homeschool. We are very fresh in that journey. We just started homeschooling our 4 kids within the last month, so very fresh.
But it's not to say that this is an impulsive reaction or we're being reactionary to everything that's been happening. I would say that, based on what we'll talk about today, there's been a lot of things related to why we form this company that we have, that it all ties together basically kind of around where we're going, where we're headed with homeschooling in the first place.
Yeah, and I grew up, I was not homeschooled. My parents worked very hard as a young child we immigrated to the U.S. when I was 5 years old. So my parents kind of had to hit the ground running and, build a life for themselves. And so I grew up in public school, and all of my life, I can't explain why or where the notion came from. I wanted to be a homeschool mom. I wasn't around other homeschool kids that I can remember, and that was just something that was on my heart. I wanted to be a homeschool mom. I didn't want to send my kids to public school or private school or charter school or any school. I wanted to be in control. That was probably it. I was, I think I've mentioned before on this podcast that I am kind of like grew up a little bit fearful, and that translated into the possibility of having children and how I would deal with having them gone from me, all day, and the fear of that. So it kind of started out that way for me. And I'm pretty sure Pierre could pick up on that. You guys know, if you're married, that you really do become one, and your spouse will pick up on things even if you don't communicate them. And so anytime I talked about homeschool, I think Pierre knew that it wasn't for the right reasons.
Well, I also shared, I can't read her mind all the time, guys. Yeah. That's not always true.
That's not true.
But when we're in sync, I would say there's a lot of times where we can, finish each other's sentences. We can get the same strategy kind of directed for our family. And also on top of that, with trying to rear our children, we've done a pretty good job of ensuring that we both agree on the direction we're going. We don't necessarily impulsively push something without having some rounded discussions about where we're going. Because I'll tell you, we've had the homeschool discussion for years, honestly, for years. I wasn't always sold on it. And then I think part of the reason why I wasn't sold on it was I did encounter the stereotypical homeschool children when I was in high school, mostly at youth group. And a lot of those kids were weird. They were not good at socialization. So I would say that there was some credence to that. However, in today's terms, I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. And so one of the things we'll talk about is sort of dispelling the myths of sort of what would make you apprehensive about homeschooling your children, or what kinds of boundaries or barriers to entry really prevent you from pursuing that. And I'd say probably there's a lot of us, even in my own mind too, where, financially we are in a 2-income household. It makes things very challenging if we think about the prospect of taking things down to a single income. And so you can let that fear kind of guide you and make your decisions for you, and think that the state of all institutions is going to have your back.
Right.
The government doesn't have your back. No offense to anyone that works for the government out there. But, it's something that I think we have become very relaxed in this thinking that these institutions like government, like organized church, like education systems, these institutions were designed to help us out. And if you start like really looking at education in particular, you'll notice that the long-term impact of what you'll see with your kids, especially what's happening today, doesn't turn out so great. And I think that's where we've really kind of come to terms with the state isn't our safety net. And one of the things that we try to do after really being exposed to how terrible the school system was here during lockdowns, kids couldn't go to school. And so we got to really, the low quality of the lesson plans, the quality of material that they were going over, or even the computer system that this application that basically serves as the backbone of Florida schools across the board in public school. Man, it's kind of scary when you look at how much that is basically set your kid up to fail. Yeah. It really kind of exposes to me to, like, I don't know, I was in high school a long time ago, but I do remember that one of the in-state Florida scholarships at the time that was available, had I really figured out how to use my dad's Florida State residency to my advantage, probably could have gotten, because the minimum GPA requirement for this Florida State scholarship program was a C average, which, I had well over an A average. So it kind of, even though that was almost 21 years ago. Even though it was way back then, the quality doesn't seem to have improved since then. And when you look at what the goals are of the school system themselves, what their focuses are, they don't necessarily focus on your kids. They don't focus on what kind of outcome each individual child is going to be. So they're grading these kids on the sliding scale of what does it take to make my school score high so that we can ensure better funding for whatever programs that this money is going to go towards. I honestly don't know what things were benefiting my kids when they were in their public school before we switched them over to the charter school. And so when we finally examined how that was, we pulled them out. We said, hey, we're going to go to this charter school. Seems great. It's set up by a very conservative university, runs the charter school foundation that kind of sets this whole thing up. So most likely there's going to be things that would help us really see what my kid's education actually was going to be like, how that was going to look like, what the framework was going to be. Unfortunately, in 2 years, that didn't happen. Right. It didn't happen at all. And so it really kind of started to push us over the edge more and more and more. And I think it just came to a breaking point where we decided, you know what? It's time. Yeah. We're not going to wait for the end of the school, the end of the school year. You don't have to. Right. Good news. You don't have to in Florida. It's not like, oh my gosh, the school year is still happening. My kid can't be pulled out because they have to, right? They have to finish. Yeah. And what happens if they don't finish? They won't get their grades, their report cards. Oops. I guess you don't need those next year if you're homeschooling. I know, right? Like what difference does that make? Honestly, and if you look at, I look at what my kids were doing and how much knowledge, and I say this to people a lot, that based on where I remember where I was at academically as a kid, my children are not even close in comparison to the grade levels that I was in. So I know it's kind of tough to compare yourself to education from even longer than 21 years ago. But at the same time, honestly, look at what your kids are learning. Actually, dive into what they're learning, and don't just look at what papers you get back, or look at what the teacher sends you on whatever dojo or whatever you might have as an interface between you, communication with the teacher, the school, like really look at what they're learning, because you might be surprised to see what things they've been exposed to that you didn't even realize, what educational topics they're covering or not covering, not exposing the kids to for whatever reason. Like I remember I was kind of disturbed when like in the full like time, my oldest, she was in third grade.
Third last year?
Oh no, she in second grade. Like in regular public school and up to second grade, not once had they ever even mentioned 9/11. Even though I think that's something that, you know, you don't need to go heavy into the details of an event like that, but at least to remember, like, let them know that this day has a sacred time, like associated with it. And so for me, like, why are we shielding our kids completely from something of that magnitude? And let alone, I just don't know, like, what other things that the school's going to focus on rather than, you know, what's, you know, potentially important for them to learn and know.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said, Pierre, about just the things that he remembered from school as a young kid, there are things that he will bring up that I don't remember learning at all. And to be honest, I don't have a lot of memories of like real history lessons or real math lessons or teachings in general. I don't have those memories growing up. I don't know if, you know, early on it could have been a language barrier for me. I did, you know, English is my second language, but then even in high school, you know, I went to high school in Florida. And what I do remember is they would drill you on having to pass what was called the FCAT back then. It was the standardized testing that everybody had to pass to, you know, get their high school diploma. If you didn't get your, you know, pass your FCAT, you were repeating, you know, 11th or 12th grade or however. And I remember they put so much pressure on that. I was about a B average student. I was not a terrible student. I didn't get straight A's, but I did, you know, get very consistently get B's, and I did, you know, fairly well in school, but I was a terrible tester. My SAT score, or excuse me, my FCAT scores were not very strong, and that scared me because I remember thinking, like, if I don't get these scores, I'm not going to graduate. Even though I can, you know, ace a lot of tests during the school year, I can do really well. I'm a great hands-on learner. You know, for those reasons, science and the science classes were my favorite because I could use my hands. I could dissect. I could, you know, actually do things with my hands. And I really had a hard time in high school and I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. And when I compare the things that Pierre remembers to the things that I don't remember, it scares me because I know those are some things that my kids are not going to remember, that they're kind of just being drilled at school, especially the public school that they were going to. When they did come home from lockdown, they would spend, you know, a few hours in front of the computer to do like their virtual classes or whatever.
They would literally have 30 minutes of instruction in the morning time, and then they were left to their own devices for the rest of the day to figure out whatever work they had to complete.
And half the time they couldn't tell us what they were, you know, what did you retain from today? They can't tell you because it's really just a computer screen, you know, going through the motions. You can do it as many times as you want until you click through and you pass. I mean, there wasn't, and of course this is that was a special case because we were home for COVID.
But keep in mind though, that is the program that supports the entirety of how they measure, how like academically sound your school is, not even necessarily the individual student, but they use that to make sure everyone is kind of lumped into the same bucket of, did you pass the quiz on the computer screen, or did you actually like internalize some kind of lesson from today? And so that focus was just, you know, that was super disappointing about how overly emphasized. And you've heard of all the things that they're trying to do in Florida, which are good, but some of the stuff they're just not doing enough of. And so honestly, like the education system is not as sound as you think it is. You may disagree with what I have to say about that, but I've got 4 kids that are in the system right now, and I can tell you that it's been complete garbage from what they know compared to where they should be.
Yeah, and we see our kids, and many people have commented on this, how inquisitive our kids are, how curious they are, how most kids are that way, right? They're excited to learn new things. They want to use their hands. They want to be involved. It's hard for them to sit still, which, yes, is a learned skill. I think sitting still is something you have to practice as children, and there's a time and a place for that. But when it comes to learning certain things, they should be allowed to use their hands and to move around and to play as they're learning. And that wonder and that excitement to learn, I didn't have that. Once I hit, middle to high school, that was gone. And I think that there's a lot to be said about the boredom that comes with school of 13 years of sitting at a desk and, the same kind of thing over and over again. It makes them kind of lose their wonder. And I didn't want that for my children. I didn't want them to be resentful, I guess, towards learning. I didn't want them to have to pick up a book because they literally had to for school. I want them to want to learn. I want them to want to pick up these books and to research for themselves. My son yesterday asked me if we could talk about World War I. I said, yeah, totally. We can do that.
And I would say that this is a great opportunity for us to either learn new things that we didn't in the past. Like in your case with World War I, maybe there's a lot of details or even renew some of the passion you may have had about certain topics that you haven't even thought about. Like for me, I thought math was really fun.
He's weird. I don't know.
I'm
can't
Asian,
relate.
so I'll go with that. But I thought math was fun. And so when I saw how they would teach math in, the Common Core stuff, and I'm like, how is this even relevant? I would never use these techniques in real life to actually do real math.
Right.
And the same thing goes with just how even some of the Singapore math stuff too, I think they're trying to force kids to be on some different level with sort of to measure the kids against when it comes to math. But I'm still a lot of this stuff does not make sense to me. Like my kids who are in second and fourth grade, the older ones, they have trouble with counting money. And I'm like,
yeah,
why do you have this trouble now? How much has schooling failed you? How much have I failed them as a parent, mind you, too, that they can't even count with, they don't even know how to spend money, as far as how to count change, what change currency, actually represents, although, yeah, we'll get there. Currency is all fake, but,
Oh, stop. Another episode. But no, I mean, he's right. There's certain things that I used to walk down to the corner store when I worked with my mom and with money, and I knew how much to bring and I knew how much change I was supposed to get. And this was in elementary school, Yeah,
I mean, I was in third grade riding on my bike down to the golf course at the concession stand there and buying candy when I was a kid. So I knew how much change I needed to have.
I think maybe that had something to do with our parents. My mom kind of taught me along the way with money when I used to go to work with her, and your mom certainly.
Yeah, but that was part of my
part of your school. See, he remembers. I don't remember that for myself, but so I guess we came to this point we talked a little bit about starting our company and everything. Our family just started changing so much since 2020, probably since the end of 2019, but into 2020, we started changing so many things. And we realized kind of this goal and focus that we wanted to, our family trajectory to go and bring us back to this root of family and community together, and those that are around us, and how do you explain that? Kind of coming back to the original intent, the tradition, the beauty of what the family is.
Yeah. And also community. What's the point of all of us living in our homes in a community and not getting out and interacting with other people? Do you know your neighbors? Don't know. Yeah. It's we know our neighbors that well.
We don't really know them very well. We know some, but.
Or can your son throw a baseball? Can your son throw a football? These are things that I'd never even thought about. I'm I'm supposed to be the one that teaches my kid this stuff. I can't rely on school to, one of the PE days they have every 13 days at their public school they were at. That's insane that they only do PE that often. Can you imagine a school full of children that have all this pent up energy that they need to let out, and they have no outlet for it in school. There's no recess, hardly any recess. And then PE is, and that's once every 13 school days, not once every 13 days. So that was just like insane for me to come to that realization. And I was trying to do sports, obviously, with our kids, but mostly soccer, which doesn't teach any throwing really. And so I realized, okay, we need to start doing things that require like some hand-eye coordination, from archery to, our son playing baseball. So like there's just a lot of things that we realized were shortcomings of ours, that we put too much trust in these institutions to help us in this, pursuit of raising our kids to be well-rounded, to be exposed to their peers, honestly.
Yeah. And
do you want your kid learning from the kid down the street? Maybe not.
And a lot of people, this is something I've heard, and something I certainly felt here and there too, is if you homeschool, you're taking them away from their friends. You're taking them away from what they like. They like going to school, and you're taking that away. Believe me, we felt that. Our twins were very reluctant. They did not want to homeschool. They were sad. They extended as much as they possibly could. Our other two were ready to come home.
Yeah, our oldest and our youngest were ready. Like they were dead set on,
yeah, this is our last day. We're ready. And that was great. But our twins really resisted. And it broke my heart a little bit, because you don't want to be the cause of, like sadness for your children. But at the same time, I knew that this was for their benefit. And, thinking that we're taking them away from their kids or being social with other people, I mean, that is a lie, because, those friends that are there, you can still see them. They're not going to be socializing in class anyway. They don't allow that. They don't allow them to socialize. Those few days they're out on recess or whatever they're playing, but half the time they're getting in trouble because they want to socialize and they want to have friends and they want to chat, but they can't in class. So
we'll talk about more of this in the next part of this episode. I know we're kind of getting a little long here, so
yeah, I have a whole list of things I wanted to chat about, just statistics in general.
This kind of just serves as the intro to what we're going to discuss about, like, these steps.